The Bavli in Maseches Megillah on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Im Yomer Lecha Zikenim, if the elders tell you Satur, you should demolish. V'yeladim Banei, and the children tell you to build. Satur v'al tivnei, you should demolish and not build. Because the demolishing of the elders is really building. Ubinyan ne'arim stira, and the building of the children is really a destruction. The siman l'davar, and the source for this, Rechavam ben Shlomo. Rechavam, the son of Shlomo HaMelech. The story of Rechavam ben Shlomo we learn in Sefer Malachim, in Malachim Aleph, Perek Yud Beis. Shlomo HaMelech, his major contribution was the massive construction project of building the Beis HaMikdash. But there was another component to the massive building project that he had. Does anyone know? What? Taxation? What?
Palaces for the queen.
So that's true. I'm talking about in like the specific building project of the temple included another structure as well.
The palaces for the queen.
His palace, exactly, his palace. And it took 7 years, if I'm not mistaken, it took 7 years to build the Beit HaMikdash, and it took 14 years to build his palace. And the same as Yoni mentioned, the taxes didn't come in the form of money, they came in the form of actual servitude. Yeah, there was a mas. The pasuk calls this a mas. It was a tax of people working. You didn't pay money, you worked. Right?
You came. Said that all those people were Gary.
That's true. It doesn't say that specifically, but it says that there was a tax on the people that they had to come and work, and they worked for a month and they went back home for 2 months, and a cycle. So you can imagine that 1 out of every 3 months for 7 years straight, you're working. Right? Maybe they cycled the people out, meaning maybe it wasn't the same people doing the 2-to-1 rotation all the time. You can imagine it's not an easy thing. But they built it right. It makes Miluim look easy, right? Exactly. So you can imagine that this is not a particularly comfortable thing. But they did it. They built the temple, and it seemed that everyone was very happy with the temple. There was a massive party. Right? It went through all of Sukkot. It went through all of Yom Kippurim. Went through all of Sukkot. Right? They didn't fast on Yom Kippur that year because there was just such tremendous simcha. It was like a Hora'as Shah, prophetic Hora'as Shah, to not fast on Yom Kippur that year. And there's tremendous celebration, and everything's really good. And as we know, Shlomo kind of takes a bit of a precipitous fall later on in his career. But be that as it may, the temple project, everyone seemed to be pretty happy about that. But then his son Rechavam comes along, and Rechavam is a little bit arrogant, to put it lightly. Okay. I'm reading from Perek Yud Beis.
Child advisors.
Right. Vayiva'etz hamelech Rechavam bazkenim. Oh, excuse me. I'm a few psukim for. This is in pasuk Aleph. Perek Yud Beis pasuk Aleph. Vayelech Rechavam Shechem ki Shechem ba kol Yisrael amnichoto. He came to the city of Shechem because that was the city that that Jewish people would come to anoint him as king, to appoint him as king, so to speak. Shechem, by the way, because that's like the primary city in the northern tribes. So it's one thing if you have a Davidic king being made king in Hebron or in Jerusalem, that's no chiddush. But he wanted to announce the fact, I'm also the king over the northern tribes. So like the primary northern city in Shechem, that's why they chose that city. Okay, so that's the story of his opponent, the official in the Shlomo government, Yeravam, who ends up taking over the 10 northern tribes. So they're all present here. All these people are present to make it official that Rechavam will take over from his father. They gave him the following proposition: Avicha hiksha es uleinu. Your father made our yoke very difficult. take off a little bit from the burden that your father placed on us, this heavy burden, that he put upon us, and we will serve you. Meaning they're not rebelling against him. They're saying, listen, we accept you as king, but listen, your father, it was a bit too hard. It was a bit too hard on us. So take off the burden a little bit, and we'll be okay. Now, what's this burden they're referring to? All those years, this decades-long project to do all these things that Shlomo wanted to do, good things, objectively good things. But still it was too much for them to handle. So he says, listen, I need 3 days to think about it. So they go, said, okay, we'll give you 3 days to think about it. So first, Rechavam, he took counsel with the elders. Asher hayu omdim es pnei Shlomo aviv, that stood before Shlomo his father. What do you recommend I answer them? Right? On the contrary, you should be an eved to the people. They're offering to be your servants, but on the contrary, you should be a servant to them. And you should serve them. Answer them and speak to them good things. If you speak to them good things, they will be servants to you. Meaning, if you show that you are wanting to be a servant to them, they will be a servant to you. That's how it works. It's great. In that one line, it kind of sums up all proper leadership. If you commit to be a servant to them, they will be servants to you. Very powerful. Yeah. But he didn't like that answer. So he left the advice of the elders, Asher Yatsuhu, that they gave him advice. Literally, the children. The children. Asher Godlu ito, Asher Hamdu lefanav. Literally, his childhood chums. It's literally, yeah. They want me to make it easier for them. This is what you should tell the people. This is what you should tell them. My small finger is thicker than the waist of my father. Which is a rather crass way of saying that the most my father could muster is not even more as much as the minimum amount that I can muster. So you think you had it rough with my father? I'll show you what having it rough is. Not only am I not going to take it, he's like, who does it sound like, by the way?
Paro.
This is Paro. This is a Paro statement, right? Moshe comes and says, let the people have a break. Paro says, no, am I not giving them a break? Well, I'm going to make it even harder. Avi saraschem bashotim, my father, he afflicted you with sticks. Va'ani asaraschem ba'akrabayim, I'm going to whip you with scorpions. So not exactly what the Zakanim had in mind. You can just imagine the Zakanim, okay, thank God Rechavam took our advice. They got up for the speech the next day and said, no, that was not on the script. That was totally not the message. So Yeravam, again, the official who served in the Shlomo government, who had the gall to publicly chastise the king for his policy decisions, so he comes now with all the people, and the people receive the message, again, the message that Rechavam takes from the children, and V'lo shama hamelech ha'am, and the king did not hear the people. Ki ha'isa siba me'im Hashem l'man akimas devara asher diber Hashem biyad achi Shiloni el Yeravam ben Nevat. The teacher of Elijah, who was a prophet named Achia Shiloni, as we learned in the chapter before, comes to Yeravam ben Nevat, again, this official who was brave enough and courageous enough to publicly criticize Shlomo, and tells him that I will grant you kingship over the northern tribes in the same way that I granted David a line of kingship. I will also grant you. So the pasuk is telling us, the narrator, so to speak, of the Navi is telling us that this whole episode was being orchestrated in order to allow Yeravam to take over. So what do we see in this story? We see the context, right? The Gemara says, Stiras Zakenim Binyan. When the elders tell you to demolish, it's really building. And Binyan Hayaladim Stira, and the building of the children is really demolishing. Right? Siman Ladavar, where do we learn this from? Rechavam ben Shlomo. Rechavam, the son of Shlomo. So there are two questions to ask on this Gemara. First of all, what was the building that the children told them to do? The children didn't tell him to build anything. What was the building? They didn't tell him to build. They said go and chastise the people maybe, or tell them off, right? Tell them to get lost, something like that. What was the building? And also, what was the stira? What was the demolishing that the Zikinim were telling him to do? Right? The context is that this whole discussion, so to speak, between the people and Rechavam was on the backdrop of this massive building that Shlomo had done. The massive building projects that Shlomo did, which were glorious, which were objectively good things, but it was too much. It was too much for the people to handle. So when all was over, they came to me and said, listen, we need a little bit of stira. We need a little bit of demolishing, so to speak. We need to hold back on the binyan thing a little bit. But Rechavam didn't want to hear it. So the Zikanim told him, listen, it's time to integrate a little bit of stira. It's time to integrate a little bit of demolishing. But the children didn't want to hear. He said, no. As much as Shlomo did, Shlomo was smaller than your pinky, meaning you're going to do even more binyan. You're going to do even more building. So the children were telling him, build, meaning what Shlomo did, that was only the beginning. You should go even more. Full steam ahead, so to speak. Right? The stira of the Zikanim, the holding back, the withdrawal, and even what appears to be destructive. Because if you're a kid, right, if you're a young, ambitious prince who was just put in charge, and you're living in the shadow of your father Shlomo, who built the temple and built the palaces and fortified all these cities, right? In your mind, the direction that you need to go in is building more and more and more, right? Bigger and better. Yeah. And what he's being told to do is to hold back, and holding back in his mind is demolishing. He's demolishing all of his dreams, all these big buildings that he has already laid out in his mind, that he has all these plans already. And the Zikanim are telling him, listen, you need to be soter a little bit. You need to be soter. That stira would have been his building. It would have solidified him as the king. It would have literally built him at that moment. And saying, listen, if you go this route and you commit to be an eved to the people, they will be your avadim. They will be your, so that act of stira, so to speak, of demolishing his own dreams, that would have solidified him. That would have solidified him as king. And not just king over Judea, but also the king over the 12 northern tribes. Why are we talking about this? Despite the fact that it's interesting in and of itself, I think. But what does it have to do with what we're talking about? The letter ches. Right? We always start off with the meaning of the actual word. All the letters in Lashon HaKodesh, they have names, and the names mean things. They mean things. And not just one thing, but multiple things. The letter ches means to break. That's what it means. Right? Chatat means to crush or to fracture. Yeah? So says Rav Kook, Hashever sheba b'tziurim hamitnagdim zeh bazeh, the fracture that is caused by two forms. Again, he refers to the letter as forms. The two forms that are conflicting with each other, that oppose each other. Idealim hasotrim zeh zeh, ideals that seem to be in conflict. All ideals are in conflict. Every ideal is in conflict with another ideal. Every that's just the nature of how it is. Zot hachatat, this breaking, hamechita, that crumbles into pieces. Ba b'tchilat hashichlul b'tor hakdama lebinyan olamim shelo shalem v'nehadar, is coming as the harbinger. That's the word, right? The thing that's it's telling us that something else is coming, right? Of the shichlul, of the development, ula binyan, and the building of worlds in a more whole and splendorous form. So this chitat, this fracture, is really the foreshadowing of a more perfect and splendorous building. Shnei zayinim zeh lekabel zeh, two Zions that are facing each other. This is really right, like all of the letters are a segue from the previous letter, but this is really a segue from the previous letter, because last time we had Zion, and this letter is just two Zions. It's two Zions that are connected to each other. So quick recap from last week. What was the Zion? The Zion is the force of aggression that comes up, that is awakened when there are, as Rav Kook said, the kochot hamafriim, the disruptive forces that seek to disrupt life. So those forces of aggression are awakened by such a thing. When they sense that there's disruption coming, the forces of aggression are awakened in order to beat away those disruptive forces. So now there are two Zions. There are two phenomenon of powerful deep primal forces of aggression that are coming to fight for their ideals, and they're facing each other. The two ideals that are in schism. That's the ches. So what happens when, right? What's the term? An unstoppable force hits an immovable object, right? The Zion is this incredibly powerful force. So what happens when you have two Zions? The two Zions is the chitat. It's fracture. It's breaking. Yeah. Machaneh mul machaneh. One army camp facing another. Hazayin shel hachayil haores. The Zion of the chayil is like the core, right? Like the Corps of Engineers, right? The Legion, yeah. The Legion that brings destruction. L'umato hazayin shel machaneh boneh. Paralleling it, the Legion that is building. Hamahares et haores. That destroys the destroyer. Mitachdim yachdav bi'itnagshutam. They become one together in their opposition, in their mutual opposition. V'harasha hava mechita mitgala. This noise, or really this earthquake, that's the context that he's using it, right? Rash in Lashon HaKodesh, as used in the Tanakh, Rash, we use that to describe like noise. Rash, but Rash in the Tanakh is like an earthquake. Yeah? Harash mechita mitgale, it reveals this breaking. The harayon ha'elyon mechaber et hazaynim yachad. But the lofty ideal brings the two Zions together. Berum olam, in the lofty state of being. Yoshev seter, in the place of concealment. Higayon nora, the lofty and awesome logic. Not logic in like a technical sense, but the higayon, like the idea or the conceptual, like let's say, right, the lofty conceptual sphere. That is the sphere in which two opposing Zions are actually able to be, they're able to find some connection and some common ground, let's say. Choshev machshavot ve'itzot mirachok. It makes its calculations from afar. That's a paraphrase, by the way, from the pasuk in Yeshayahu in Perek Chaf Hey. The pasuk in Yeshayahu Perek Chaf Hey says, Adonai Elohai ata arom imcha. You, God, are my power. I will exalt you. Eitzot merachok emuna omein. Eitzot merachok, the counsel from afar, meaning you planned out a strategy that took very, very long to materialize. So it's this idea that he's alluding to, that there's this divine calculation that is coming into play, and it's manifesting itself as the coming together of two Zions, of two opposing forces. Sham hachai, sham hachiyut. That's the other connotation of the word ches. Ches, chayut, life force. It's the life force. Sham yachas hachayim el kol asher chayim bo mafchim. The life is able to relate to things even if they are in opposite of each other. Mefachim, opposite. Chayat torecha adat aniecha. So that is a quote from Tehillim Lamed something. We'll get to that at the end, and why he's quoting that. Chayat torecha, fine, we could just say that to the end because it's a thing in and of itself. We'll get to it at the end. Oz hamilchama, the might of war, the hamilchama neged hamilchama, and the war that comes in reaction to the war. Mehaveh et hachayim b'chol arkeim u'muvneim. It presents life in all of its different values and all of its different possible structures. B'chol seifeim, with all of its consequences, v'stafutam, and all of its branching out. Meaning the full spectrum of possibility. The full spectrum of possibility is able to be unified despite their violent and aggressive opposition to each other. That's the ches. And the Gemara in Menachos, which is the sugya that gives us the details of how the letters are supposed to look like in Lashon HaKodesh, in Ashuris. So it says that the connection between the two Zion. The truth is, it actually doesn't specify that a ches is supposed to look like two Zions. There's actually a Masorah that says that the connection between the ches is just supposed to be a straight and horizontal line. But be that as it may, in the Gemara in Menachos it says that the connector between the two Zions is supposed to be like a chatoteres de gamla. It's supposed to look like the hump of a camel, like something like it goes up right? It goes up and then back down again. So it's alluding to the fact that the connecting force is kind of like, it's emanating from on high. It's kind of like the...
Paradox a bit.
What?
Paradox, the chet.
Right, the chet is a paradox, and that's why the thing that's connecting them is from a dimension that's higher than the two Zions themselves. I think of it as kind of like the strings on a puppet almost. It's like it's hanging from above, and like there's these two strings that are holding it. And if you're looking at the level of just the Zions, they seem to be just two Zions in opposition to each other. Yeah. In fact, I remember when I was learning many years ago with a bar mitzvah boy who was like just beginning to learn his parsha, and he came across a ches in the Torah, and he read it as two Zions. Right, he read it as two Zions, right? It was something like chatas, like a korban chatas, right? So it's a korban zatas, yeah, korban zatas, zazatas, right? Something like that, right? Because it does. It looks like two Zions. If you've never seen a ches written like that way, it kind of does look like two Zions. Yeah, so it is. That is the structure of the letter. It's two Zions that are connected by this strange construct. Tov. So reading a few sections from the commentary, and then we'll there was a point I wanted to highlight. That's why I asked for the Midrash Tanchuma. So a few lines from Rav David. So ka'asher kochot mitnagdim or mitnagchim. He said, right, they're goring each other. Right, they come in fierce opposition to each other. V'idealim sotrim zed chavero notzeret shvira. That is the cause of fracture. All fracture is when two ideals, they come in opposition to each other. So that can manifest itself externally when two people, they have, each one has their strong opinion and they end up getting into a fight. But could also occur internally when the person has two ideals and it causes shever. We quoted before, I forget in which os we quoted this, but it appears in a Ruach Kodesh that a person who is unstable internally, it's always a function of the different ideals that he himself gives importance to that are in opposition. Meaning the person, right, if you ask a person, is kindness a good value? Yes. Is discipline a good value? Yes. Okay. Can you imagine how those two things can come in conflict? Yes, I can. So what are you going to do? Now, right, so now you're in trouble. Now you need to go up a level, so to speak, to resonate with something higher than just those two plain ideals that can connect them. Yeah. So gam hapoel chitat hamavate pachad otzmati. Chitat, the third connotation of the word ches, is tremendous fear. Where do we see that chitat alludes to fear? That ches means fear. The pasuk in Bereshis by Yaakov Avinu that after Shimon and Levi wipe out Shechem, so Yaakov is concerned that he's going to be targeted by all the surrounding nations, and that fear was legitimate, right? So they leave immediately, and even though they're all there, the whole chamula of Yaakov is walking through the landscape completely exposed, the surrounding nations don't attack. Why not? So it says, "Vayisu vayihi chitat Elohim al ha'arim asher sevivoteim." There was chitat of God, meaning there was a terror of God that was placed on the surrounding cities, v'lo radfu achrei bnei Yisrael, and they did not chase after Yaakov and his family. So it was like this divine terror that struck all the people. In the Sefer HaYashar, which is a very old midrash, it says that there was an ensuing war that took place after Levi and Shimon wiped out Shechem, which is what Yaakov Avinu alludes to later on in Parshas Vayechi, that he says that he's giving Shechem as an extra portion to Yosef, right? I'm giving you Shechem in addition to what I gave to your brothers. That I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow. And he's referring to this incident, the war that ensued after Shimon and Levi wiped out Shechem. So there were consequences to that. But what this pasuk is telling you is that it didn't escalate to what it could have, because there was some type of divine fear that befell the entire region that they didn't. Yeah.
Like the sort of the obvious connection that is begging to be made is the relation to chet, to the word chet, which is obviously with the tet at the end. but it's also the very last. It's also the very next letter in line. Is there no connection?
There's
also the connection of
so it's not. So it's not. So it's not tet.
It's what it's.
So it's not tet. It's probably the tough.
With the tough.
Yeah.
Excuse me. That's what I meant. But it's like it's very closely related to the meaning.
I hear you.
And
That's interesting.
Just a little off.
Interesting.
The very next letter is also.
That's an interesting idea.
They're not.
I hear you. I wonder if we'll bring that up in the next os. You're saying that chait, like chait, also sounds like chait, like sin.
Yes.
I hear you.
And
that's an interesting point. An interesting.
Of destruction.
I had not thought of that. Maybe it's connected. It's connected thematically to what we'll learn next time in os ches, in os tes rather.
Was that fear that they had because they saw how these brothers wiped out a whole city, or did God impose that fear as a protection? Like, where did it come from?
So the pasuk, I would say that the pshat connotation, the simple connotation of the pasuk is that there was some supernatural element to this. It says chitas Elohim. It doesn't say the chitas of Yaakov and his family. It says like there was this terror of God that befell all the cities. There was some type of supernatural thing. Could you say that it was also, seeing the destruction and then seeing how Yaakov and his family responded in the initial outbreak of the war, and they said, okay, we probably shouldn't mess with these people. It's probably a combination of both. So Makor Kabbali. So again, I think we've quoted in the past that the Ramak, the Pardes Rimonim of Ramosha Caravero, is a very important source for this entire work. So he quotes from Pardes Rimonim. It says, "V'yesh mishaperish b'inyan acher ki ches remez legvura." That ches connotes the whole theme of strength and aggression. Milashon vayi chitat Elohim shehi pachad. Right, the chitat Elohim, the pasuk that we quoted before from Bereshis Lamed Hey. Right, chitat means fear. Gam hapoel mechita. Mechita is it's. I'm not sure what the difference between mechita and chitat is. Both have the idea of like of breaking and fracture. Okay, so he's just bringing another source, which is actually interesting. That word mechita has a very, very specific connotation, which is for when defensive walls are breached. When defensive walls are breached, it's called a mechita. He brings over here from the pasuk in Yirmiyahu. This is in Yirmiyahu Yud Zayin. He says, "Al tieh li lemechata." Do not be for me a breach. Machsi ata biyom ra. Rather, you should guard me in the day of evil. That's what Yirmiyahu is praying to God. Do not be a mechita, meaning don't crumble before the attackers, right? So the mechita is like the crumbling as a result of like a strong blow. And this is what Rav Kook means when he says "Hamechita ba'a b'tchilat hashichlul b'tor hakdama levinyan olamim shalem v'nehadar." This mechita, this crumbling, is really the introduction to the building of worlds in a more whole and splendorous way. The next section, Hachalat Nigudim. This is the concept of how the Ches are two Zions, right? They're two forces of aggression that are opposing each other, but they're able to come to some type of unification. That's the idea of the Ches. So he says, "Rak or elyon me'od yachol laseit b'tcho stira gemura u'lechaber shnei kochot." Only a great supernal light is able to contain within it two things that are in complete opposition and hold both of those forces simultaneously. And this is what Rav Kook means when he says, "Harayon ha'elyon mechaberet hazaynim yachad b'rum olam." That the supernal ideal is able to connect the two Zions. And he brings over here, this is strangely enough, this is connected to what we were talking about on Shabbat at Seudah Shlishit. He says, "B'torat hasod musbar she'ein sof hu noseh hafachim." The idea of the infinite, what characterizes the infinite, is that it is able to hold two things in opposition. What we were talking about on Shabbat, we're learning the Maimar of the Alter Rebbe in the section from the Zohar in Parshas Truma, commonly known as Kegavna. So the opening line of that section is Kegavna de'inun misyachadin le'ela, in the same manner that the spherotic body is in complete unification up above. Af ihi, also her, referring to the feminine attribute of the spherotic body, i.e. the Malchus, Ihi isachadas lasata, is also unified down below. So there's this power of unification, which we don't need to go into the details of it, what the difference is between the unification up above and the unification down below. But basically, the power of unification is that things that are in opposition to each other can exist in a common ground. To the extent that, the whole theme of that ma'amar that we're learning is that to the extent that a person is oriented toward the orientation of the mochin, of the chabad, of the wisdom, that the light of wisdom is able to shine on his emotional faculties, so he's able to hold two opposing emotions simultaneously and also control their experiential flow. But when a person leaves wisdom and is only at the mercy and whim of whatever emotion he's experiencing in that time, so the emotions are in opposition. Either he's going to be angry or he's going to be generous. He can't be both. But if a person is attached to wisdom to the extent that a person lives within the light of the Chabad, of the triad of consciousness, so to that extent he's able to hold two opposing emotions simultaneously. That's the isachadas la'ela, that is unified up above, the isachadas lasata, and it also experiences unification down below, even in the domain of application. That a person is able to to apply in the real world. He's able to have that finesse of applying two opposing emotions at the same time. So that is the idea of the Ein Sof, the infinite. It's able to hold two things that are opposing each other. So just one quick word about that pasuk. I said I was going to get back to it at the second to last line of Rav Kook. So he quotes this pasuk. It's not really a quote. It's kind of like a paraphrase. So the paraphrase is from Tehillim Ayin Daled, and the pasuk says the following: Al titein lechayat nefesh torecha. Do not give over your beloved dove, referring to the Jewish people, lechayat nefesh, to the beasts of the field. Chayat. So chayat is like chayot, right? The beasts of the field. Do not give over the Jewish people to the beasts of the field. Aniyecha al chayat aniyecha al tishkach lanetzach. The chayat of your poor ones, the life of your poor ones, again referring to the Jewish people, do not forget. So he said. So it's right in this one verse are these two different connotations of the word chayat. One are like the beasts of the field, and one is the beating heart, so to speak, of the Jewish people, the internal life force of the Jewish people. So for this reason, Rav Kook quoted this pasuk, because it's like a double entendre in the same pasuk. Right? He's using the same word to refer to completely two different things, like the opposite. One is the chayat hasadeh, which is the enemy, which is coming to kill you, right? And one is the chayat aniyecha, the life force of your poor one, referring to the Jewish people that want to be saved. So here he brings a section from Shmona Kavatzim, which were until recently the unpublished, or let's say the unorganized manuscripts of Rav Kook. There were these 8 manuscripts. That's what they call it, Shmona Kvatzim. There were these 8 manuscripts that were not put into any order by Rav Kook himself. So they just published them in kind of like raw form. So there's a section here in which he talks about the nature of war. So he says, in the philosophy of Rav Kook, and he talks about this in Sefer Orot. In Sefer Orot, there's a section called Orot Milchama, right, the lights of war, so to speak. And he explains there that basically war comes from the hatred of anyone else that isn't similar to you. However, that hatred is really a perversion of something that is very important. And what is it a perversion of? It appears in the form of war, and in its internal nature, it is paradoxically an expression of l'matra chiyuvit, of a positive goal, shel havlatat pratiuta shel kol umah, of the expression of uniqueness that is in every nation. Meaning, really, what the person wants is to express their unique singularity. That, I'm special, I'm unique, I have what to bring to the table. But it comes out in this hyper-aggressive form of just killing everything that isn't like you. Yeah? So obviously that's not an ideal way of expressing it. Right? But he's just pointing out that really what you see as aggression is really trying to just show what you have and what makes you unique. So that idea he kind of lays out in Arot Torah, and this is the quote from Shmona Kvatzim. Hapratiyut tzricha latzeit mi'akoach al hapoal. All pratiyut, everything that makes something or someone unique, it has a desire to come out and express itself. Lahashir et yikar tiferet hamitziut, because in the end of the day, he wants to enrich the spectrum of reality. That's what the pratiyut wants, right? The unique identity of the thing, of the individual, or even the group. Right, group identity, it wants to come out and express itself in order to enrich the rest of the world. Because as we know, the klal, the totality of being is able to hold within it all the different pratim, all the different unique special lights in the world are able to be contained in the collective reality. But in order so that the lights of each particular thing can come out into expression, it needs that every prat will assert itself. And that's why it needs something to hold it back a little bit. Which is a force that is opposing all unique individuality. In order to give room for the other prat to also express itself. Meaning, if your pratiyut is, if your definition of pratiyut is killing all the other pratiyuts, then that's not a healthy expression of pratiyut, obviously. Yeah? So your blita, as Rav Kook says, your assertion of pratiyut needs to be integrated with something that allows all the other pratim to express itself. And he brings over here something beautiful, that this process of the two pratim coming out in opposition, because initially the pratim, they don't know how to express themselves in a non-aggressive way. All they know is how to shout and yell and say, look at me, right? Which is what all war is about, right? They're all just shouting, look at me, I want to be special. You know? So they don't know how to do it. So it's very often, unfortunately, that the shouting match is what precedes the ability for the two things to actually work in harmony. Because when the two things feel that clash, so what do they experience? First of all, they experience that it's actually not so fun to fight. That's the first thing that they experience, right? The second thing that they experience is, there's this other thing that also has something to bring. That's also, right? Like, people that really think about conflict and strategy and the whole area of competition, people that are really smart are actually hyper-analyzing their opponents. They're hyper-analyzing them. They really, really want to know what their opponents are good at. They actually want to know. Right? There's a famous thing that when they brought on Patton in late 1942 to fight Rommel in North Africa, so they saw that he had Erwin Rommel's book on tank warfare with him in his suitcase. Right? He was a close student of this man. Right? I was thinking, why would Rommel write a book on how to fight with tanks when you want to share all your secrets? But that's a different question. Anyway, but he was very serious about it. He knew that the man was a genius, was a tactical genius. That Rommel was very, very had tremendous prowess in this area. He was like, listen, I want to learn whatever I can from this guy. So this is what Rav Kook means, is that this clash of opposing forces is what actually leads to the mutual recognition of pratiyut, of uniqueness. Yeah, and he says this is the deep meaning of what the teaching that is brought in the Tana Debelio that ends off Masechet Brachot and a few other Masechtos, that Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam. The Talmidei Chachamim, they increase peace in the world. People think that that's the raya that Chazal had a sense of humor, but really it actually means something. Meaning the opposing forces of the Talmidei Chachamim, when they're arguing it out, when they're duking it out in the Beit Midrash, things can get pretty intense. Yeah, like the Gemara in Yevamos says, right, that Pam Hayu Nichlachim b'Beis HaMedrash. There was an incident where the rabbis were arguing in the Beit Midrash, Ad shenikru Sefer Torah b'chamasam, until they tore a Sefer Torah in their wrath. Yeah, so the Gemara says, what do you mean they tore a Sefer Torah? It's like, yeah, they did it by accident. They weren't paying attention. Like, what do you mean they weren't paying attention? Like, how could you not pay attention? Right, when you're holding a Sefer Torah, you don't realize that you're. But that was the experience. Right, it got so intense that they destroyed the Sefer Torah. but symbolically also, right? That's what it means. It's like it got to a fever pitch. The machlokas got to such a level of intensity until they realized this fighting isn't going anywhere. All it's doing is tearing the Sefer Torah. That's all it's doing. When they came to that awareness, that was when they were able to discover the synthesis. But this is the paradox. This is the paradox that he's alluding to. It's only when the two Talmidei Chachamim come with the full force of their arguments. You have to bring the full strength of your position. Why? So that the other person will see the merits of your case. If the other person is honest, he'll see the merits of your case. And when he brings his all to the table, you'll see the merits of his case. And that is that, right? So it's dafka, the clash, that allows the synthesis to take place. Because if you don't bring everything that you have, then you're not displaying what you have to offer. So this is a paradox. So the ches is, right, the experience of the ches is this break, it's this fracture. But what it's actually doing, right? If you look at the letter ches, what's actually going on are two Zions coming together and being able to be connected through an ideal that is higher than both of them collectively, or together rather.
So written in Russia.
Huh?
Written in Russia.
How is that a good example?
World War II.
Yeah, for sure. So it's just on the topic of chitat being this experience of fear, of divine fear. So I just wanted to quote before we end off. We have a few more minutes. The Midrash Tanchuma in Parshas Lech Lecha. We see many times throughout the Nevi'im the use of the word fear in contexts that we would think are completely inappropriate. In fact, it uses the word fear many times to explain the emotional response to something good happening. It uses that many times. In Sefer Yeshayahu, in Perek Samach, Pasuk Hey, if I'm not mistaken, it says, Ufachad v'rachav levavech, that you will be in terror because your heart has been widened. Right? Kivo alecha hamon yam chel goyim yavo lach. When you see the riches of the world coming and funneling into you, like that seems to be the wrong emotion, right? When you see the riches of the world coming into you, you're not in terror. You're happy. You're exuberant. But there's something about the pachad which is actually a response to something good. I want to read this midrash. This midrash quotes one of these psukim that uses this word pachad seemingly out of place, and it says something very powerful. This is in Midrash Tanchuma, Parshas Lech Lecha, Siman Tes Vav. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ba'olam hazeh, in this world, atem misyarim min ha'avonos. You have fear of your sins. You have fear of making mistakes. That's your fear. You fear of something going wrong, basically. In the world to come, you're not going to have the same challenges that you have now. There's not going to, right, the temptations and the pity mistakes that you make now, they're not going to be issues in Olam Haba. Atem mispachadim al hatov hatzafun lachem. The pachad that you experience will be for the good that has been prepared for you. Shnei Amar, as it says, Achar yashuvu b'nei Yisrael uvikshu et Hashem. The Jewish people will return and seek out their God. That's David Malkam and David their king. Ufachadu el Hashem ve'el tuvo, and they will be in terror of Hashem and His good. Umar tuvo, and what is this good? Zu beis hamikdash. Shenemar hahar hatov hazev alvanon. Moshe Rabbeinu praying to enter the land, he asks to be given access to the good mountain. What's the good mountain? Har HaBayit. Har HaBayit is the good mountain that has the, right? Hahar hatov hazev alvanon. Pachad is, and this is also connects to something that we were talking about on Shabbat. Pachad we relate to as terror. Like you see something that can hurt you and you run away. That's terror. But terror is not that necessarily. Terror is the phenomenon that you see when you come across something that is way beyond the confines of your typical experience. That's pachad. It's way out of bounds, like not on your conscious radar. Suddenly you're hit with something and it's so new and so awesome and so powerful, it triggers pachad. One response to pachad is the fight or flight, right? You run away. You're in abject terror, you run away. But the other response to pachad is, as Yeshayahu says, right? What we quoted from Yeshayahu, ufachad v'rachav v'avech, and you will be in terror, and it will cause your heart to expand. The terror, the pachad of seeing something that is incredibly unique and beyond your normal range of experience, that causes your heart to expand. Yitzchak Avinu teaches us this, by the way. Yitzchak Avinu, his experience of God was pachad. That's what it was. You think, why would I want to be in terror all the time? You're right. You don't want to be in terror all the time, but pachad you can do. If you're able to handle it, pachad is actually a good thing. Pachad, you want to be in a place where you're experiencing this such high inspiration that it's causing you to expand. It's causing your capabilities to expand, your heart to expand, your emotional capacity to expand, your intellectual capacity to expand. It causes everything to expand. Yeah. So the chitat is the fear, chitas Hashem, right? Chitas Elohim, rather, right? This divine terror, which causes a mechita. It causes like a fracture. It could be a traumatic experience. But what it's actually doing is it is bringing in an infinite divine light that is powerful enough to hold all the forces of opposition that are in the external world and also within us. Right? It's giving us the ability to expand beyond our current paradigms. That's basically what it's doing. So it looks on the outside, it looks like it is a mechita, it looks like it's a fracture, but actually what it's doing is elevating our paradigm to be in a loftier plane. Yishar Koach.